Welcome, students of South Harmon. Please take your seats and get ready for today's lesson in seasonal league dominance. We're getting bold today, folks. We are getting blue, diamond, almond kind of bold. Wasabi and soy is my favorite, but we are going bold. And I love Bold Take Day because you take what you believe, the research you've done, you put it out there, but you turn it up to 11. So we're getting real bold today. I got 6 bold takes for the 2024 season. But before I get in to today's lesson, make sure you are subscribed to the South Harmon FF YouTube channel. Head over to southharmonff.com to pick up everything the boys are putting down. And make sure you're ready to smash that like button and go ahead and leave a comment. If you have a question, concern, anything, leave it in the comment section and we will get right to it. Students of South Harmon, today's lesson has begun. Yeah.
Final round. Fight. Finish him!
Bold take number 1. Isaiah Pacheco is a top 3 running back in fantasy football this year. Let's start with his current role with the Chiefs, shall we? He projects right now to be a 3-down back. I don't care about the signing of Samaje Perine. Will he be there for depth in the passing game? Sure. But he wasn't part of the plans a couple weeks ago, and he's hardly part of the plans now. Isaiah Pacheco is going to be a 3-down back for the Kansas City Chiefs. And when you look at this depth chart, now with Samaje Perine there, it's still really not that strong behind Pacheco. You have, of course, Cheeks, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Carson Steele initially made the 53, and then Samaje Perine. Clear runway for Isaiah Pacheco to absolutely take off in a big way in 2024. If he is that 3-down back, which I believe he will take over, what does that mean for Pacheco? Well, that's going to mean right around 200, 225 plus carries. He had 205 last year, and McKinnon had a fair share. Of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a smattering of carries. So the lead back can project him for anywhere to 20 plus. Last year, Isaiah Pacheco had 50 red zone touches on his own, so you can expect that number to go up in 2024. And you can also expect a 3-down back for the Kansas City Chiefs to see 70 plus targets. There was 81 between Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon last year. Of course, Isaiah Pacheco has already proved that he's #good at foosball. Last year, he had 9 total touchdowns. He had 895 yards created. That was top 12. He had 11 runs of 15 or more yards. That was also top 12 in the league. And he averaged 15.3 fantasy points per game. He was running back 14. And now, as a lead back, he will smash in this offense because, when we look for running backs in fantasy, we're looking for a few things. We're looking for a guy who gets, the guaranteed touches in the first, second down, or we're looking for a guy who gets goal line work, or we're looking for a guy who has abilities in the passing game, the ability to make catches. Cheeks checks all of those boxes, and that is why bold take number 1, Isaiah Pacheco, top 3 running back in fantasy football. Bold take number 2, numero dos. Garrett Wilson leads the NFL in receiving yards. Garrett Wilson has been an absolute stud in his first 2 professional seasons. He's had a combined 315 targets, 178 catches, and 2,145 receiving yards. He's gone over a rack both of his years as a pro. But really, the production is there, but the fantasy numbers haven't been there. It really hasn't translated to fantasy dominance. That can be contributed to the fact that he doesn't really catch a lot of touchdowns in this Jets offense. 7 total touchdowns over his first 2 years. He's averaged 12.6 fantasy points per game, which on average has been wide receiver 31. Again, we know he's good, but it hasn't led to fantasy production. Why? You may be asking now. If you play fantasy football, you know damn well why he hasn't been dominant in fantasy. It's because the quarterbacks he has played with in the NFL. I'm going to go ahead and list the 6 quarterbacks that he's caught balls from. Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and this is before Joe Flacco emerging as a good quarterback for Cleveland. This is bad Joe Flacco. Mike White, who just got cut, couldn't even become the quarterback 2 in Miami. Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, and someone named Chris Shriveler? I don't know his name. He played that one game. He's from like Canada. And he ran around and he wore a fur coat or whatever. But he ain't good at throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson. Now, folks, Garrett Wilson has not only a good quarterback on his team and in his offense, hopefully he has a full season of a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. We're hoping, of course, fingers crossed, that Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy after only playing, 3 or 4 snaps last year. Got hurt on Monday Night Football against the Bills, which is a sick joke, NFL, putting him back on Monday Night Football against Nick Bosa and the Niners. Come on. But anyway, we're expecting a full season from A-Rod. And what does that mean? Well, let's look at the connection between Rodgers and Davante Adams, his wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Anytime that Davante Adams saw 100 plus targets, this is how he's finished with Aaron Rodgers. 12th, 8th, 1st, 6th, 1st, and 2nd. He is a perennial fantasy monster. So with Aaron Rodgers, he has a new monster in Garrett Wilson. And when we look at the strength of schedule metrics over on Fantasy Pros, our friends over at Fantasy Pros, you see that the Jets have the 7th best schedule for wide receivers. Garrett Wilson has paid his dues, folks, to the fantasy gods, and in 2024, he gets blessed from the fantasy football heavens, having a healthy Aaron Rodgers all year long, and that is exactly why bold take number 2, Garrett Wilson leads the NFL in receiving yards. Bold take number 3. Sit down for this one, folks. Brian Robinson outscores the king, Derrick Henry, on his way to being a running back 1 in fantasy football. The running back situation seems murky in Washington, but for the B-Robbers, and that's what we're called the B-Robbers now, we're just loving the value that we're seeing in drafts because of Austin Eckler. This is a new offense. It's being run by a new offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. And this is what Cliff Kingsbury had to say about Brian Robinson.
B-Rob he's a number 1 back in this league. There's no doubt. I mean, I think after this season, if he stays healthy, people will recognize what he can do in the run game and the pass game. And some of those young guys are coming on. And then to have Coach Lynn coaching that room, working with those guys, who's been a head coach, who's been an offensive coordinator, it's been fantastic to watch that group grow. Yeah, it's similar to having a quarterback that can extend the play and get into that second phase. It doesn't have to be blocked perfectly for him to finish downhill, and that's huge. And he takes a lot of pride in that, and he's a physical runner. And so, yeah, I've been very impressed with his style of play and the way he's handled everything thus far.
He also sang the praises of Austin Eckler, but signs that, when you're looking at last season, the signs are pointing that Austin Eckler is just his best days are behind him. And if you want to go check out an in-depth analysis on Austin Eckler, go over to the South Harmon Fantasy Football YouTube channel and find my grenade whistle lesson on this channel, and you'll see exactly why I am believing the narrative that he is not a lead back anymore. But Brian Robinson is. And Brian Robinson, folks, is good. Last year, he was 7th in yards created per touch. He was 12th in total running back touchdowns. And his breakaway run rate, his missed tackle rate, and his juke rate, all of those are very encouraging, and they point to a player that is productive as a running back and as a rusher in the NFL. Last year, he also had a 1.11 wins over replacement. That was 16th highest amongst running backs. Brian Robinson has shown an incredible evolution as a pass catcher. Rookie year, he had 9 catches. Last year, 36. As a rookie, he had 60 receiving yards. That's it. Last year, 367 receiving yards. Also last year, he had an 83.7% catch rate, a 1.72 yards per route run, and a 10.2 yards per reception. All of those metrics were top 7 amongst NFL running backs. winning in fantasy football means betting on particular takes. I'm betting very big on B-Rob. I think that makes me the president of the B-Robbers crew. I think it does. And Bree Robinson this year is going to have a great 2024 season. Matter of fact, that's exactly why. Bold take number 3 is Brian Robinson is not only a running back 1 in fantasy, but he also outscores the king, Derrick Henry. Bold take number 4. CJ Stroud finishes as the 3rd highest quarterback for fantasy in the AFC South. Okay, it's going to take a second. Going to take a second to let it settle in. But let's take some time to unpack exactly what that means, okay? Obviously, it means that 2 other quarterbacks in the division outscore Stroud. So Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Trevor Lawrence. 2 of those guys outperform Stroud in fantasy football. So let's look at those quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson, he's being picked about 10 to 12 picks higher than Stroud on Underdog, which means the sharps out there are already on board with 1 QB finishing higher than CJ Stroud in the division. We all know why that is. I mean, Anthony Richardson possesses tremendous upside given his ability to rush the football. His size, his athleticism is quite unique. One of the most athletic quarterbacks of all time. He has good weapons in Indianapolis. He has Michael Pittman. Of course, they just drafted A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor. There are weapons for the Colts. Also, factor in that he has a very gifted and an offensive-minded head coach. Those are the driving force to our belief that Anthony Richardson is in for a big 2024 season and why Anthony Richardson is being drafted on Underdog right now ahead of CJ Stroud. So that's one potential quarterback outscoring Stroud. Let's look at the other 2, because we only need 1 now of the other 2. If the consensus is that 1 is projected to finish higher, then we just need 1 of the other 2, right? So let's look at Will Levis. The investment around Levis ranks atop. It's at the top of the NFL. I mean, they have gone out and they have turned their efforts up to $1 million to make sure that Will Levis has all the tools to succeed as an NFL quarterback. They hired a successful former offensive coordinator as his new head coach. They put a heavy investment in the offensive line, taking 2 offensive linemen in the first round each of the last 2 years. They've added not 1, not 2, but 3 playmakers in the passing game. They have added Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and Tony Pollard. He has the 3rd best strength of schedule for quarterbacks in fantasy football. The road isn't that difficult. There aren't big hurdles for him to climb to have a good season in his sophomore year. And the other quarterback in the division, Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has low-key rushing upside. He's averaged more than 300 rushing yards in his 3 years as a pro. There have been improvements to the Jaguars' passing attack, and more specifically, they've made investments to the offense in terms of the skills that best suit Trevor Lawrence as a passer. You know, his strengths as a passer are being highlighted here by the acquisitions that they've made this offseason, and of course, I'm talking about Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball deep. Last year, Trevor Lawrence was 5th in deep ball attempts, 8th in air yards per attempt. He was 7th in money throws, 8th in deep ball accuracy rating. So we know he's good at throwing the football, but he hasn't had the weapons to really convert on a consistent basis deep down the field. So the Jaguars went out and they added Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Both of those are big play, over the middle, deep type receivers, guys that can go up and get it, guys that have speed. And with Brian Thomas, we saw him have 7 touchdowns last year. I believe it was 7 at LSU of 25 plus yards. So the deep ball threat, pair that up with Trevor Lawrence's ability to throw the ball deep. This is a recipe for success. And last year, despite the woes for the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence in fantasy, he was still 12th in wins over replacement. Stroud was 13th. There's a road in which we've seen Trevor Lawrence be more valuable in fantasy in our 1 QB standard home leagues. This is what we're talking. But the best schedule for quarterbacks in fantasy, according to Fantasy Bros, that belongs to Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we're talking about, again, not big hurdles for him to clear to have a great 2024 campaign. And this is not an indictment on Stroud by any means, although I do think he is getting drafted a bit too high. I blew the whistle on that grenade in a past video, but it's really not about putting Stroud down. It's really just being pretty excited about all the quarterbacks in the AFC South. So I gotta ask, is that bold enough for you? Is bold take number 4? Is it bold enough? CJ Stroud finishes 3rd amongst fantasy quarterbacks in the AFC South. Bold take number 5, Bijan Robinson goes from a 1.26 WoRP to over a 2.00 WoRP. Now let's take a look at exactly what that means for our traditional seasonal leagues. I'm talking about the PPR, 1 QB, no tight end premium. What does his wins over replacement look like? What does a 2.00 WoRP look like for us seasonal drafters? That's going to mean about 250 plus carries, 36 more than he got last year, 60 plus catches. He had 58. He's pretty much knocking on that door already. He's going to push 2,000 all-purpose yards. He's going to need to score 15 total TDs. He had 8 last year. And he's going to have to average around 24, 25 fantasy points per contest. He had 14.5. So we need a big jump. But this is the type of guy to do it. And for some more additional context to the 2.00 WoRP Club, last year, that was only, that membership was just one. It was just Christian McCaffrey. This year, Bijan Robinson joins the 2.00 club. And how is he going to get there, folks? Well, we're going to start with his new coaching staff. New head coach, new offensive coordinator. Both of those guys come from the Sean McVay, the LA Rams system, who traditionally lean on one running back. Kyren Williams in 2023 with Zach Robinson as his offensive coordinator, he was 4th in opportunity share and 1st in snap share. The team ran the 12th most run plays per game. That's what we want to see in Atlanta this year for Bijan Robinson. And Bijan, quite frankly, is just one of the most gifted running backs we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years when he came out of the University of Texas. In his rookie campaign, we saw 58 catches. Love that. 5.4 yards per touch, 63 overall evaded tackles, and 1,041 yards created. All of those metrics top 10 in the NFL. The marriage of a new staff with Bijan is absolutely perfect. Last year, Bijan was 19th in total carries and 32nd in red zone carries. We expect those numbers to go up exponentially in 2024 with these new coaches. The increase in rushing volume while he maintains his passing work is what is going to clear the path for Bijan to become that 2.00 type player. Super valuable in fantasy football, obviously. But even last year, he was a great pass catcher. We saw it as a rookie. 2nd in running back route participation rate and 3rd in running back target share. So as long as he continues to maintain the work in the passing game and he gets that volume increase, that something similar to what Kyren saw last year, Bijan Robinson is going to destroy. We have a new coaching staff that is going to cater their offense and run it through a Bijan Robinson. And on the other hand, we have a player who is truly special, who's great in the passing game, and we know is an effective rusher. And sometimes you got something in one hand, got something in the other hand, and you just got to do what the great philosopher Joey Tribbiani said once upon a time. Put those hands together. And when that happens this year, Bijan Robinson is going to smash in fantasy football. And that's why my bold take number 5 was Bijan Robinson joins the 2.00 wins over replacement club. The 6th and final bold take in today's lesson, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts. What am I going to say about Kyle Pitts? Kyle Pitts is not a top 12 tight end in fantasy football. Right now, he's currently being selected as tight end 8 on major fantasy football platforms. And if we're taking the draft at face value, we need to see, or I need to see, or the community to see, however you want to phrase it, 4 tight ends that are being drafted after Kyle Pitts have to outperform him to get him outside of the top 12. So how are we going to get there? How am I going to get there for this bold take? Well, I got a bunch of guys I want to talk about here at the position that are being drafted after Kyle Pitts that could, and I believe will, perform better than Kyle Pitts. Let's start with David Njoku. Tight end 6 in 2023. He was 5th in tight end wins over replacement, and he was number 1 in YAC amongst NFL tight ends. This is a guy being drafted after Kyle Pitts that for sure can be better than Pitts in fantasy football. The next tight end, Jake Ferguson, which is going to make a lot of people puke in their mouths, but let's look at Jake Ferguson, folks. Tight end 9 last year. Also last year, Ferg's WoRP, his wins over replacement, was higher than Pitts. So So he was more valuable than Pitts last year. He's already done this. He projects to have a major role in a Cowboys offense. In last year, having that big role, he was number 1 amongst qualified tight ends in red zone targets. So Jake Ferguson could be that guy drafted after Pitts that outperforms him in fantasy as well. This next tight end shares a lot of similarities with Kyle Pitts. Brock Bowers. He's the best tight end prospect that we have seen since Kyle Pitts came out. In Georgia, they constructed their championship-winning offense around him when he was just a freshman. Sometimes we have to take a step back and realize how good and how special players are. I know expectations get put on these players, projections get put out there, but we have to realize that the Georgia Bulldogs and their championship offense saw this guy at 18 years old and said, we have to design an offense that caters this skill. And the Raiders, well, they've kind of picked up where the Georgia Bulldogs left off. We've seen him used all over the place in the preseason. And quite frankly, a guy like Brock Bowers, his ceiling is as high as almost any tight end in the NFL. And let's look at 2023. It's hard to not say that the rookies in the 2023 class reset the expectations that we should have for rookie tight ends in fantasy football. And when you take all that in, and you also add in the fact that the Raiders have the second best tight end strength of schedule, according to Fantasy Pros, Brock Bowers is another tight end that could outproduce Kyle Pitts that's being drafted after Kyle Pitts. And then, of course, you have to factor in the field. Every other tight end. Your Pat Fryermuths, your TJ Hawkinsons, who's on the pup. He's out 4 weeks, but he will be back. Dalton Schultz is in a high-powered offense. If he's the touchdown catcher this year in fantasy, hell, any tight end that catches a shitload of touchdowns, they have the chance to get inside that top 12, further pushing Kyle Pitts down the ladder. The football world, again, will be left at the altar of Kyle Pitts. The breakout season ain't coming, and that is why, sorry to say, bold take number 6, Kyle Pitts is not a top 12 tight end in fantasy football this year. So that's it. My 6 bold takes as we head into the 2024 season. Make sure you're subscribed to the South Harmon Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Please, folks, demolish that like button and leave a comment. Let's get these numbers up. Let's get this algorithm pumping here on YouTube. I can't thank you enough for today's lesson. After you leave this lesson, head over to southharmonff.com to check out everything that we got going on as we head into the NFL season. Thank you so much for tuning in. Class, you're dismissed.